All right. Well, hello, survivors. I'm glad to be able to meet today with a special guest, Andrea Garn Taylor. I knew her as Andrea Garn growing up. Welcome, Andrea.
Thank you.
I'm excited to be able to reconnect with Andrea. We went to high school probably went to junior high and high school together, and we're acquaintances. Didn't talk a ton, but I always just remember Andrea as just being one of those most kind and gentle and quiet individual, but just kind to everybody, and not a lot of bells and frills, but genuine and sincere. And we had some together friends, acquaintances, and recently she had submitted to the Move in Memory initiative her brother Tyler, who she'll be talking a little bit about tonight. And I was honored to be able to move in memory of, and she was able to with her family on June 2nd, right? It was the 2nd?
Yep.
Yeah. And Tyler was married to my cousin, Angie, a next door neighbor and cousin of mine. So we've had some life connections and correlations and that have brought us together. And then I just recognized recently when we were talking in the days ahead that my oldest brother, Jess, when he passed away in March, it was of the same year, 1993, that Tyler passed away in 1993 as well. So that was a new connection that you brought to my awareness. So I'm really grateful that you, one, submitted his name and that we could kind of reconnect. And then as I learned and more about Tyler and your story, I'm really grateful that you have learned a lot of great things and that you've been able to experience that gift that service has been through that very challenging and hard thing into you and your family's lives. And grateful that you'd be interested and willing to share your message with us tonight. So we're both 96ers. We, picked up sticks. I think that's what it said, right? Picked up sticks in 96. That's what our graduation skirts were.
I think so.
Neither of us had cell phones at that time. We graduated. We, crazy Pleasant Grove, Utah.
I think the internet was just a thing. Like I remember our senior year, like English class, we had to use the internet, and I thought it was so stupid because it was slow. But now look at us.
Yeah, and I can tell you that if that was an English class, I didn't remember it. I barely made it through my high school years. But yes, the internet was just coming. I had an email address when I got back from my mission in '99. So that was totally new. So we're aging ourselves. And you shared with me that you're a grandma.
I am a grandma. I have a 2-year-old grandson.
Super exciting. And
yeah,
maybe you'll share with us how that experience happened a little bit. But anyways, I'm glad to have you join with us. I'd like to, if you wouldn't mind just sharing with us a little bit about your family, your story, and introduce our listeners to you today.
So my mom and dad, Jerry and Karen Garn, they both grew up in Northern Utah, high school sweethearts, got married. Tyler was their firstborn. He was born in Northern Utah again. And he was an only child for quite a while. My parents didn't know if they were gonna be able to have any more kids. And so when he was, I think 6, they adopted my sister, Kim. And it was funny because Tyler, on the way home, I remember my mom saying, Tyler was so worried. What are we going to feed this baby, Mom? We don't know what to feed babies. But he was a great big brother from the get-go. And then 2 years after they adopted Kim, they had my sister, Jill. And then 5 years after Jill, I came along. So I'm the baby of the family by quite a bit. There was 13 years between Tyler and myself. So, which was great because we didn't have that sibling rivalry. I was his little sister that he adored and teased, and we had fun, but I don't ever remember fighting with him because there was just that age difference. I'm sure I annoyed him, but you know, like we just had a great relationship. I remember one time he came home from college and he didn't have any plans that Friday night, which is unusual for him. He was always going and doing stuff, but he asked me if I wanted to go on a date with him, and he took me to go see Who Framed Roger Rabbit at Alhambra Theater in Pleasant Grove. Josh, you probably remember that theater. And it meant so much to me. And now, even now, like I've watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit with all my kids, and every time it makes me think of Tyler. He loved to tickle and tease. Family dinners, you didn't ask him to pass anything, because if you asked him to pass it, he literally would throw it. I remember him picking up a baked potato and throwing it at my sister because she asked him to pass the potatoes. So, you know, and bless my parents for putting up with that, you know, like he was just a jokester. I remember frosting fights. I remember Kim was ready to go out on a date and she like splashed some water on him, nothing big. And he picked her up and put her in the shower and turned the shower on. And he just was a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun with him. He dated Angie Jensen in high school, and they broke up for a while. I remember Angie was married to another man, and she had Mitch. And I remember we were still friends with the family. And so I went with my mom to the hospital to see Mitch. And when we left, my mom was crying, and I'm like, why are you crying? And she's like, that should be my grandson. And now having a grandson, like there is nothing better, like that joy when that baby's born. And luckily 10 months later, he became her grandson. 10 months after Mitchell was born, Angie had gotten divorced when he was a baby, and her and Tyler reconnected. They always had this special connection. Tyler always knew what if Angie was going through stuff, or he just had this he was really connected to her and he loved her. So they got married, and he became an instant father, and he just doted on Mitch. I remember he would bring Mitch over for my mom to babysit her son during the day, and you could always tell if Tyler dropped him off because he'd smell like Tyler's cologne all day long. Mm-hmm. You know, and then Mitch and Angie, or not Mitch and Tyler and Angie adopted my niece Danielle. Surprise adoption, that's a whole nother story, miracle, but she was meant to be in our family. And Tyler called us one night and said, I want you to come meet my daughter. And we're like, what? Like, what, you know, but she has blessed our lives. And he loved being a dad. Like, I remember stories of him and Mitch chasing a mouse with a fly swatter, and, you know, him playing around with Mitch. And then Danielle was born, and Angie was a nurse. And so she would work long hours, have 12-hour shifts. So Tyler would take nighttime duty, and he'd wake up with Danielle and he would play with her. And my mom's like, you don't play with babies in the middle of the night, you get them back to sleep, you know. But he enjoyed that special time with Danielle. He enjoyed that one-on-one, nobody else is there, just time to be a dad. And he loved his children, and they were his world. That was what was important to him. So he also, I guess I should tell you more about him. He loved basketball and the outdoors, hunting, golfing. He played basketball and tennis in high school. He very active, just very outdoorsy, very enjoyed his time golfing. Like towards the end of his life, it was golfing every weekend, right? Like it was, and sometimes during the week with his job, he'd take out salesmen and they'd go golfing. And so.
What did he do for work, Andrea?
He worked for a company in Salt Lake in, I believe it was in their business department. It was Cookie Tree. They made cookies. Okay. But accounting business was kind of his area. He got his associate's degree it wasn't UVU at the time, but it was the same school.
Yeah.
So, but business.
I had forgotten that Angie had been married previously for a short period of time.
Mhm.
Yeah, okay. And I do remember how excited I know our family was for Angie and Tyler to get married. I do remember specifically that, because that was that first marriage was not a good situation. So
Right.
Cool. I had forgotten that detail.
Yep.
So they were married in
Oh, I
was
don't
it
know.
91, 90?
Let me think.
Well, it doesn't matter.
Probably pretty close to that. I'm trying to think how old Mitch is. Is he, I think Mitch is 31. He'll be 32 in October. So probably 31 years ago.
Yeah. Okay.
Oh.
And so then there were some things with within Tyler that maybe some didn't know about, or was your family aware of that he had been struggling with some depression and
Yeah. So Tyler reminds me a lot of his personality, and even he kind of looks like Jerry Seinfeld. He was very funny, very lighthearted, always making people laugh. If you would have told me that he was depressed, I wouldn't have believed you. None of us knew that side of Tyler. I don't feel like. I feel like that was he kept it to himself. He worried about, he was a caretaker. He took care of everybody else and not himself, I feel like.
Okay. So tell us a little bit about his life ending and that experience for your family from your perspective, because you were at that time
15.
Well, 15 years old. Yeah, same as me.
Yeah.
Just finished up 9th grade.
Mm-hmm. So it was actually the first week of summer, summer vacation. And my sisters were all married out of the house. My dad worked in California. And so he was in California when this happened, and it was just me and my mom at home. And I remember getting the phone call. My mom got a phone call. Angie called my mom, and she wanted to just make sure we were home. She wanted to come over, and my mom could tell something was wrong. And so just pushed and said, what is going on? And I could only hear my mom's side of the story or the phone call. And by my mom's reaction, I knew it was bad. So I went into the bathroom as I was already starting to cry. At this time, not knowing what it was. And I can still picture 15-year-old me in the mirror. I can tell you what I was wearing. And just hearing my mom's reaction to the news. And my heart was broken, and I didn't even know why. Sorry. But she got off the phone and she told me. And back in the day, this pre-cell phone, we had the landline, right? So we had to start. My mom had to find a way to reach my dad, and she was in no position to call my sisters, and she regrets the fact that she had me call my sisters, but I don't regret it. I regret how I told my sisters. I just kind of blurted it out, but I have to give myself, I was 15, right? Like, and so I called my sisters, and I remember that because, we needed them there with us. We needed everybody home. And everybody came. My mom contacted my dad's boss, and he got him on a plane home. And it's amazing the support that just starts pouring. I don't even know how half the people that showed up on our door knew. I really don't know. And my best friend, Bridie, who's a mutual friend of Josh's, she found out from a neighbor that they said, hey, have you heard about Andrea's brother? And she's like, no, what are you talking about? And I don't think she could get to me fast enough. that's just the relationship we have. Is she was right there, and a lot of friends and neighbors were there to support us. And it was tough. That was just the call that no parent wants, right? And unfortunately, my mom got that call that day, and just really difficult. Just one moment. I was gonna have tissues handy and didn't. Sorry.
So,
But anyways, and the blessings that come, growing up in a Christian religion, I always just thought you were damned to hell if you committed suicide. It was, and through promises and answers to prayers and blessings, I know that's not the case. I know that I'll see my brother again, and I know that he's okay. And whatever pain he was in, he's no longer in that pain. And I am so grateful for a loving Heavenly Father and Jesus Christ that looks on our heart and not maybe on our actions sometimes. That I think they know what my brother was thinking that day. None of us do. We don't have answers. But I remember looking at the graveside service. Well, we had a funeral, but when we were at the grave, looking at his name on a little plaque and just knowing that that's a see you later, not a goodbye. And I'm grateful for that knowledge, for that belief that I will see with him again, and I will be with him again. He was found in his truck, hunched over, and unfortunately he took his life with a gun. And but there were many blessings that came from it. And one of the EMT responders knew Tyler was from, went to high school with him and was able to take care of his truck for us. And there was a lot of little tender mercies that we didn't have to deal with. We didn't have to worry about. We went through hell that week. And I think anybody who loses anybody, but with suicide comes judgment. We judged ourselves, right? Like I remember my mom and dad going through their minds thinking, what could we have done different? What if, what if we would have stayed in northern Utah instead of moved to Utah County? What if, like they were just questioning everything, all of their life's decisions. And it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter why. It doesn't matter what we could have done differently. We just had to move forward. And Tyler did leave a note, and and in the note he kind of shares that that he was, in his mind at that time, was thinking his wife and kids would have a better life with the insurance money and different things like that. So I think even in his death, he wasn't thinking selfishly, even though it is a selfish act. He wasn't thinking that way. He just needed an out, I believe.
Yeah, that's, thank you for sharing that. I know those phone calls, I know those moments are they're permanently etched in our minds and our hearts. And none of us can fully understand everybody's situation, but those of us who have gone through a death or something of that nature understand the shock, that acute anguish that's felt, the you describe your mom, and that's what I remember so clearly with the news that when Jess died, is that my mom's cries, they were the anguish there. And I appreciate that you share with us that we don't understand people's minds in that situation. Suicide is, every death is different, and suicide is its own different category. And, you know, you guys are fortunate that Tyler's was not in a, I guess what I would say, a vindictive or some type of a retaliation type of a situation, but the result of probably in his situation, as you've described, something that he at that moment felt like was a better thing for his family, but which says a lot about Tyler in general. You know, when death occurs, we are lucky in the community that you and I lived in. You were immediately surrounded and served by those that knew you and loved you, and that creates an environment that is sweet. It prepares a soil for healing and for seeds of healing to be planted. And it takes time, but at least that soil is prepared with love and service from the community and from your friends. What was that like for your family after that occurred? What was that? How did you guys, what were some of the things that happened, and what was that like for you coming out of that situation, and what experiences, you know, were, how old was Tyler again?
28.
So 28, so that's been 29 years, right? Next
Yep.
year will be 30 years. So 29 years has passed just last week since this occurred. Give us some highlights or some experiences of how your family and you personally came through and out of that experience.
So a lot of it was just relying on each other. Unfortunately, when you say that your loved one died of suicide, there's judgment there. Not everybody, like I said, we had a lot of family and friends that rallied around us and really helped us. But even now, and at the time, I didn't even know how to say that. Like, I was 15, and to have to say that my brother committed suicide, I didn't even, that was so hard for me at the time, because there's this stigma to it. And so, you know, to avoid it, sometimes I just said he was died in his car, and which was the truth. But now I'm not ashamed to say that he died of suicide. It's just how he died. But people's reactions, I watch people's faces and their facial reactions, and you know, sometimes they're like, oh, sorry, then we won't talk about it. It's okay to talk about it. And I think we need to talk about it. Suicide should not be a hush-hush subject. Do we want to promote it? No. Do we want we want anybody to think that it's the answer? Absolutely not. But I think we really need to communicate so that mental health, I think a huge problem in society is mental health, and just our families, you know, we had, since then, a lot of my family members, suicide has touched their lives again in some way or another. And our experience 29 years ago has helped us help other people and to be there for them, and to just show that support and know that, you know, nobody could have came and said the right thing to make everything magically better. You can't say anything to make somebody go through the mourning process in one visit. But it's just coming and being our friends and being our loved ones and standing by us and letting me cry my ugly cry while we talk about whatever, and until I went through this, I didn't even think about this, but we had people show up with boxes of Kleenex and we're like, oh, thank heavens, we're using toilet paper. We'd ran out. And, obviously people would bring food, but people served us in so many ways. One lady, my mom was saying how her eyes just were on fire or just burning. And Visine felt like you were pouring acid in them. And she said, pour milk in your eyes. Just do a couple drops of milk and it soothes it. And amazing, world changing. My mom's eyes were able to clear up. It's those little things that the people helped us. I'm showing up with 6 loaves of bread and homemade bread, and we put it in the freezer, and I think we ate on it for a month. And and just those little things but the blessings and prayers that we felt to support us. But it was difficult. It was difficult to go back to church where you feel like you're judged, or you might hear something that is hard to hear, right? Like you don't want, I know, like the last, to go back to the same church that we had the funeral in, that's a big step. And I don't think people think about those big steps. Like last time I was here was my brother's funeral, or my parents, it was really, their son's funeral, and different things like that little things that you just don't realize.
Have there been any specific events or specific ideas or concepts that you've learned since that time that have kind of been transformative to help you understand, or is it just kind of been a gradual process?
I think it's probably more of a gradual, but as we go through it, like the biggest lesson I learned is it's okay, like for me to teach my kids, or for me to talk to my kids, it's okay to have those sad feelings, those upset feelings. But when they get really dark, I want them to be able to come and talk to me so that I can get them help. If I have friends that get to that dark place, I want them to be able to talk to me so that I can help them choose a better avenue. Like growing up, I know like only crazy people went to therapy, right? And you don't need medication, you can get through this. And that's not necessarily the case for everybody. And accepting that it's okay to cry, it's okay to be upset, it's okay to go talk to a counselor. If that counselor doesn't help you, find one that does, because they're not all gonna click with you. And if you need medication, if that's your road, that's okay. Don't be ashamed of it. We shouldn't be ashamed of talking about our feelings. We shouldn't be ashamed of saying, I need help. Because I think that's the biggest thing is, I know my parents would have moved a mountain to help my brother.
Yeah.
And, as some of my children have suffered from depression, we did everything we can. And I keep hearing stories of like 12-year-old kids choosing to end their life. And it just breaks my heart that they felt like that was the answer. And I just really think that we need to step up, not as just as parents, but community members, and that quit shaming, quit judging, that people need help, and that's okay. We all need help in one way or another.
Yeah, I certainly am no expert, but I think that conversation is critical in those situations. I know for me in my life, there have been extreme darkness that I have felt. I've contemplated, and I've had ideation of suicide before, and I've thought about ways that I would end my life and times when I should, and how it would be better, and why I think, or at that time, why I thought that it would be the right situation. But for me, thankfully, I've always found somebody to share with, and sharing has has kind of tamed, or it's kind of unlocked, or it's dampened some of those feelings of total despair, and it's brought just a little ray at those times, a little ray of light into a room of darkness in my mind.
Yeah.
And so I think that talking with somebody, anybody, is really good. I think, just recently of the conference of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Elder Jeffrey R. Holland pleaded with, us as a community of people that, and particularly to the youth, that if they feel that way, that to please reach out. And unfortunately, it's the last thing you want to do, but that is a helpful road. I think that I've never tried milk in my eyes. I don't know medical.
Medically, I'm not a doctor, right? Like, so.
Yeah, I don't know. I love milk. So I probably, I'm gonna maybe look into trying that next time I have my eyes boiling red with cries. And your comment about Kleenexes, the other day when we talked, you mentioned how that's one thing that you do in situations where there's a loss or grief or some tragedy. That's one of your ways that you serve, is by taking boxes of high quality, as you stated.
Yes.
High quality Kleenex, not the sandpaper Kleenex,
Yes.
cheapies, but taking Kleenex to people. That's a great blessing. What have you been able to share with, like you said, your children or others that have suffered, or what have you been able to share with them that you've learned through Tyler's loss do you find has been helpful, or what has been helpful that has given you the ability to serve?
I think, well, the biggest thing with service, right? Like, as much as it's for somebody else, I think we get more out of it when we serve others. It's, if I'm able to lighten the load of someone, even if it's just listening, an example, my husband had a small medical procedure a few weeks ago, and they took him back, and I just was waiting in the recovery area because we're a small town hospital. We just can wait there. And the nurse was sitting there talking about her late husband, and she's probably close to looks half my age anyways. And I'm like, oh, you're kind of young to already have lost your husband. And she didn't skip a beat. And she just said, well, he committed suicide. And we were able to sit and talk and share our stories. And in fact, when they brought my husband back, she says, dang it, you guys, we were having a great conversation, just to have that moment. And it was great. Like, I really, truly treasure that conversation for me and for her. Like, she has 2 young boys. And so she's left to raise them, and just to hear her perspective from a mother's point of view, and then mine from a sister's. And anyway, it's just having those conversations. But I've had nieces and nephews lose friends, and we get it. We understand. We're able to talk to them and listen to them. And I think a big thing is listening. We don't have to say earth-shattering advice. We don't have, but to just listen and to let them process. And you can share your experience, but theirs might be completely different. And as much as, to help people, to help them realize that they're a child of God, and that He loves them and He is there for them, is probably the best thing that I can ever even tell anybody, is that He wants us to be happy. He wants us to succeed. He wants us to find joy. He wants us to have joy. And so if I can help somebody, just little things, maybe the service is dropping off a flower, or, I had one friend that she picked up a loaf of gluten-free bread and took it to somebody because she knew they couldn't have gluten, and it made that person's day. Like, how simple is that? As you're at the store and you just happen to see something somebody needs. And, it's those little things. my mom, when it first happened, my mom was told in a blessing that she would be able to help people. And at the time, she was screaming, like, I can't even help myself. Like, how am I supposed to help other people? But she has been able to be that support, be that go-to, even just a listening ear to people throughout this.
Okay. Well, I know that you've probably done way more good and way more service than maybe you fully even realize. And just visiting with you the other day, and I appreciate your willingness to share with us today. I think, we've heard quite a bit in the media. A lot of tragedies have occurred, and many times these isolated individual events are likely the result of isolation and of feelings of loneliness and of feelings of not understood, or that's, you mentioned the 12-year-old boy. I know that was a situation where he was bullied, or certainly he felt alone. And I think that listening is one of those things that can make a big difference. I also want to just share with you again that day that I had the opportunity to move in memory of Tyler on Thursday of last week. It certainly was a little teeny gift, and it happens from time to time, but I felt a very kindred spirit and a very joyful individual in my heart, and one that I guess the feeling I had was just of appreciation and gratitude to you and your family for the way that you have responded to that decision that he recognizes was not the right decision, but it was what it was and is what it is. And you are correct. I think that he definitely is in a good place, but you guys have done amazing, and you've held strong, and you've served many. And I appreciate you coming and sharing this 29 years later, sharing with us some of your feelings. I am remiss that as a youth, I didn't have the sensitivity to visit with or to reach out in that situation, even being so recently fresh with that. March to June's only a couple months, and but I'm grateful that I can visit with you now, and it's helped me to visit with you. I appreciate that a lot. I know that you have participated with survivors a little bit. We certainly appreciate you following us and sharing today. The essence of survivors is to try and find service opportunities in the face of loss, particularly with death. The principles apply to any kind of loss. And I know that, as you mentioned, when we get out and serve, it's hard not to leave that situation, even though we're striving to serve somebody. It's hard not to leave that situation feeling like we weren't the one that was served the most and benefited from that the most. So we'll do our part, I think, certainly to try and spread that awareness of mental health. It's an important topic. I know we've had many who have followed us that suffer and have experienced suicide in their lives, and it is a unique type of death that unfortunately needs to be talked about more and acknowledged more, and we do need to reach out and be more aware of, and we can't prevent it in all situations. Mm-hmm. But we certainly more of it if we will be aware and talk about and reach out anyway. And certainly I would like to invite anybody that may be watching or that will watch this, that if that's something that you reach out, I know that Andrea, myself, any of the survivors groups, at any point in time, we always want to make ourselves available as a listening ear. Shannon has a connect group that meets once a month specifically, and we can meet more often than that. If there's ever an interest or desire, please join us and reach out to us. We want to be there. We want to listen. We want to support in any way we can. So, Andrea, thanks so much again for joining us. Is there any other thoughts or questions that you, or anything you would like to share in closing?
Not comes to mind. Just hold your loved ones tight and let them know that you love them. You know, that was the biggest thing, is when Tyler did die, none of us questioned that, because every time he left, he said, "I love you."
Yeah. That's a good quality. Well, we love you, Andrea.
Thanks.
And I love you for sharing and being with us today. So much appreciate that. It's been very precious.
Thank you.
All right, let's see if I can. Okay, I think I've ended it.
Okay.
The buttons are always hiding for me. Oh, here.